Good morning, everybody. Shell Lake School District Superintendent Todd Felhofer is our very special guest today, Friday, February 28th, 2025. For DrydenWire.com, I'm Ben Dryden, and you're watching DrydenWire Live, presented by Americans for Prosperity Wisconsin. AFP Wisconsin works to reignite the American dream and break down government barriers that hold us back from our full potential. Visit afpwisconsin.com and join AFP to fight for more freedom for all Wisconsinites. As some of you probably are aware, the school district of Shell Lake will have an operational referendum on the April 1st ballot. So here to discuss this is the superintendent of the school district of Shell Lake, Mr. Todd Felhofer. Todd, good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Ben. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on the show.
Again, you were on what,
Yeah,
over a year ago?
almost 2 years ago, I believe.
Almost 2 years ago. Holy
Yeah.
cow. Time's flying by. We have a ton to get to on one topic, which is bizarre. Just one topic is going to take the whole show. It'll probably take 4 hours, but we're going to keep it down to like 45 minutes. I had asked you a couple of days ago if you could send me some talking points, so it helps me with my show flow, and it was brilliant. Thank you so much for sending it. Some of these things that we'll be talking about is this referendum. Why is it needed? Why are the mill rate projections lower? How will the money be spent and impact if the referendum fails? So there's a lot to kind of dive in there and kind of get more of the detailed answers from you. But first, I think it's important we probably kind of set the stage here of how do we get to this point now. So if that's all right with you, I think we kind of just go back a little bit. And this is before your time. This is when I think Superintendent Bridenhagen was there. Maybe it's even before his. So the school is a new school in Shell Lake. New-ish, right? When was that
Well,
built?
I think the majority of the building, which is about 30 years old, about 5 years ago, there was an addition added on that basically brought the PK through second grade into that portion of the building.
Right.
So we're all in one building now. So the bulk of the building is 30 years old. But like I said, the little end that was put on sort of the south end of the complex is 5, 6 years old.
And by the way, I actually remember when the school was built. That must have been 93, 94,
Hmm.
because I was at Shelley School District, and it was our junior year because our freshman and sophomore year, because the school got condemned, we were in trailers for my freshman and sophomore year of high school. So we were actually, my junior year was the first year that opened. Okay, so that's when the addition got put on. Do you remember how much that was? Like 5 million, 15 million, something?
It was more closer to about 10.
10, about 10 million. Okay. And I know that was before you were there, but do you know how that works? Is like the school kind of looks at this and figures it out, or do you hire like an outside agency, like a consultant firm or something, and say, okay, here's what you got to do?
Yeah, usually you're working through a construction company. Kraus Anderson, I believe, is who handled most of the planning um, for that addition onto the
Sure.
building.
And
And
so at that time, that was just for the building itself.
right, I mean, there's two different kinds of debt that schools can incur. You have capital debt, which is for buildings,
Mhm.
which we do have some debt for that addition. But there's also debt would be on the side of the operational referendum, which is what we're looking at now because the costs of us providing a quality education for kids continues to go up. and
Yeah.
and we'll talk a little bit later
Yeah.
about how the funding mechanism really has created some winners and losers across the state of Wisconsin.
And so, how long have you been the superintendent at Shell Lake? It's what, a little over 2 years, 3 years?
This is yeah, we're halfway through my third year here. So
Halfway through third year. So when you got there, I guess what I want to really find out is when did you start realizing, like I'm looking at these numbers and this isn't adding up and this is a problem. Did you know like right away? Did you know before you
yeah,
got there, or was
yeah.
it took a year before we started realizing it?
I mean, it was pretty apparent, given that the first budget was a deficit budget, and that would have been created prior to my arrival. So it took a year to fully assess it, and then November we were um, presenting a referendum to the community. Um, so this has been sort of building over time, and
Sure.
it's one of the things I've told the board several times is that. Um, this was on the horizon for a while, and possibly maybe should have been addressed a little earlier, but you can't go back and, Monday morning quarterbacking is fine, but it doesn't change anything.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and I agree. It doesn't change anything, and it's time, it is what it is. Let's move forward. Let's fix it, right? But at
Yep.
the same time, I think it's important to also look and say, okay, did we not notice that before? Why didn't we notice that before? Should it have been addressed before? Because that does tie into the are we making the same mistake again?
Right. Well, and I think one of the things too, the district did have a, a healthy fund balance, which allowed and has allowed us this last couple of years to absorb that. But we're to the point where that's not going to be possible for much longer.
Okay.
And, um, and fund balance is necessary because throughout the course of the year, we don't receive our revenues on a consistent basis. They come in at certain times, and by the end of the school year, the money's been, we're waiting for stuff that will come in July, and our fiscal year ends in June. It's crazy how this works, and
That's a whole other problem.
so
So
oftentimes we use the fund balance to make those final
sure.
payroll payments, and that as we go into summer, then the tax revenue and the state aid comes in following that, and so that fund balance helps us to avoid short-term borrowing to meet our obligations. And there are many districts in Wisconsin that have to short-term borrow every single spring to make their final payments to employees and any vendors that they work with. So you really don't want to get into that scenario.
Yeah. And by the way, hearing that bell go off is bringing back, I don't want to say fond memories, but wow, that was I
Well,
haven't
you were a
heard
late girl. It had to be fond memories.
So there was a referendum that was put on November's ballot,
Correct.
correct? How much was that for?
The dollar amounts were quite similar, and about 500,000 the first year, 870 in the second, 1.2 million in the third, and then about 1.4 in the fourth year.
Okay.
Um,
So
now,
compared to this one coming around was 505, 875, 1.285. Those are pretty much the same, but there's about a $300,000 increase this time around for the fourth year. So
right.
we could probably get to that a little bit later. That's fine when we go through all of this. But so it didn't pass in November. I think it almost did, right? It was pretty close.
Yeah, 57 votes.
Yeah, out of how many?
Oh boy, obviously it was a presidential election. It was a good
Yeah,
turnout. It was,
right.
um,
So when that happened and it didn't pass, first of all, did you think it was going to, or didn't you? Or did you
well,
really like, I have no idea?
well, you always want to be optimistic that things will pass. I mean, if you know ahead of time it's going to fail, I probably wouldn't recommend going. I mean, it
Well,
would make no
right,
sense. It takes a
right.
lot of time and energy to get
Yeah.
that going. So clearly we thought that it would pass.
And so when it didn't, did you already kind of not necessarily anticipate it not passing, but you must have had a contingency plan already? Like, okay, if it doesn't pass, then here's what we're going to do. Or was it, all right, didn't pass. Now we have to kind of recircle and go, now what do we do?
No, I think obviously the 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 thought would be if it were unsuccessful that we would take another shot in April, because if we are limited to the number of times you can go to referendum in a calendar year, plus there is no election in the fall of 25, so then it would wait again for a whole nother year. And so trying not to, if you have the gaps too far in between, the consequences, which would be the cuts that we would have to make, would be pretty,
Sure.
uh, would really change what we're doing for kids.
All right, well, let's get to this stuff then. And again, I had asked you a few days ago if you would send me some kind of talking points here, kind of for our show flow. The first thing you have on here is the why is this needed? And there's three sub bullet points here. The first is uneven funding system, which I would think everybody would. I don't think you can really argue that one. I mean, that one's we all are aware it's an uneven funding system. But for people who aren't aware of that, could you elaborate?
Well, and the revenue limits really define how much money school district can either tax for or receive from the state. And that was really set in place over 30 years ago. And when that was done, districts who were lower spending, more frugal, and Shell Lake was one of them, uh, that's where you got locked in. And so for the next 30 years, we've been trailing other districts. And again, one of the things that really surprised me as I was digging more into this, there are 421 school districts in the state of Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
Shell Lake's per pupil revenue limit is 414th. And what that means, just from a local perspective, I looked at the 5 districts that abut our district. I'm not going to name them on the air. People
Well,
can
we all
figure
know
out.
who they are, right?
Yeah, we could all figure out. Those districts receive from $1,361 to $1,912 more per pupil per year.
More
More.
than
So that's
Shell Lake.
than Shell Lake, yes.
Why?
That's when the revenue limits were locked in. That's kind of how things got set. And so, when we're, and I doesn't, the state average is 12,500. Shell Lake is just over 11,000. So
How many students are there in Shell Lake?
about 570. So you do the math on 570 times, say,
Well,
just
even
pick
the low number of
$1,000.
1,300, that's $750,000.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And again, obviously every community has unique situations.
Yeah.
But the idea that, does it cost? Is it realistic to think that Shell Lake can educate kids give them the same opportunities for that much less
Yeah.
than other districts? And I looked at, where people say, well, different sizes, that maybe affects things. And really, if you think about economies of scale, which is an economic concept, usually the bigger you get, the smaller your costs can be.
Correct.
Well, it almost is working in the opposite from the smaller districts. And I looked at the 3 districts that are smaller than Shell Lake. We're 280th in enrollment of the 421.
Okay.
I looked at the 3 districts who are just smaller than we are, and the 3 districts that are just bigger than we are. So, and the gap between those 7 schools from top to bottom is about 30 kids. So they're about as,
Sure,
in terms of size, as you can be. And they're from all over the state. A couple of them are down on the Wisconsin-Illinois border. We've got one that's actually in our Lakeland Conference. We've got one over in northeastern Wisconsin. One's over in the Eau Claire area, and one's in south central Wisconsin. So it's kind of covering the geographic area of Wisconsin. All of them are significantly more in terms of their revenue limit. In fact, the smallest one's revenue limit is $7 million. Ours is 6.4. The highest one's revenue limit is 7.6.
what is that based on?
It's always based on the level of spending 30 years ago, and it hasn't changed much.
But I mean, what is that based on? I mean, why is it that you look at it and they're all within like 30 people size difference? So let's face it, they're relatively same size.
Yeah.
But it's significantly less for one school versus others. What does that contributed to?
Well, I think some of these districts perhaps have passed a referendum that may assist in that number. But again, one of the other points is that mentioning is declining enrollment, where if you are losing some students, you are losing aid as well. So that happens over time. So the revenue limit has created winners and losers.
What I mean is this also like schools? Homes. So property tax, right? Because obviously that's a piece of the pie, is it not?
Well, it is, but again, when the state gives you your limit.
Yeah.
That the revenue limit is made up of your general aid from the state and the amount of money you can tax your community.
Correct. And there's a limit on how much you can tax.
Well, it's based on how much money the state gives you. So let's say if you're, for example, we'll use $6 million.
Sure.
So as the district's limit was revenue limit was $6 million, the state says we're going to give you 3. You can tax for 3 because you can only get to 6.
Yep. You're up to that. Yep.
If the state says we're going to give you $2 million, you're now going to tax for 4. and so that's always going to be in line. So
Okay.
it's so that's controlled. So
All right. Well, let's move on to the next one here under the why is this needed? Rising educational costs. Do you have examples of what that is? Do you have three, four, five? I'm sure you do. What do you mean? What
well, I
falls
mean,
under that umbrella?
well, pretty much, we're a people-based business. Obviously, we're a service industry. I mean, our budget is made up of 65% of our budget is for salaries and benefits, which is actually lower than many districts are in that 70 to 75%. Um, but when you want to give your employees a modest increase, and we've been under 2.5% the last couple of years, so we haven't even gotten close to any kind of an inflationary CPI increase. That alone costs that adds an additional $100,000 to $115,000 to your budget. If your revenue limit goes down, which it did for us this year, our revenue limit went down 40,000. So we lost 40 before the year even started, $40,000. And we want to give our employees just a 2 or 2.5% raise. That's another hundred and say, let's use 100,000 just for
Sure,
simplicity.
sure.
So we're already $140,000 in the hole before the year even starts. Well, then we have health insurance, and we're in a large co-op, 27 school districts. So we have, the advantage of it's a large group. So you've got some bargaining, you've got the ability to, hopefully get better rates. Well, our second year was locked in at 9%. They came in at 8, which again, not terrible, but that was another $60,000 or $70,000. So now we're almost to $200,000. We haven't even started the year yet in terms of a budget deficit to fill, which means how do we fill that? Well, we can cut people. I mean, that because ultimately that becomes the revenue savings, is because that's your biggest part of your budget.
Yeah.
Transportation costs go up. Insurance, our liability and property insurance, as I'm sure a lot of people in the community I know feel the same way. They've got their car insurance bills. Where are they? Well, we bear that too, and so that goes up. And so you start dealing with and just the costs of food for the food service area, just general supplies, all
You mean
that.
like, really? Well, it's one of those things I didn't think about, but it totally makes sense. The cost of, because you have to feed the kids. So employee increases, pay increases. I'm assuming that also includes teachers, right?
That is teachers. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, well, you have other people that work there.
Well, yeah, I think the employee benefits, wages and benefits, that includes
Yeah.
all our employees.
Yeah, right. Yep, and then health insurance, and then of course a food service. So these are kind of are these the three biggest pieces of the pie, or I should say the first two are probably the biggest ones.
Yeah, transportation's a big one too, and another cost, and again that's kind of referenced I think in one of my talking points, is that at the end of the year we transfer over $800,000 from our general fund, which is our 10 fund, to our special education fund, which is Fund 27, to zero that account out. And part of this goes back to when special ed came into being back in the mid-70s, the federal government and the state said, yeah, we understand unfunded mandates. We're going to help you pay for this. Well, that hasn't really happened. Back in the 80s, the reimbursement was around 60%. That was the high water mark. Now we are at roughly 30 to 32%.
Ouch.
So for every dollar we have to spend on special ed, we only get 30 cents back. And so that's 800,000. That's 9% of our budget. 9% of our budget has to be transferred over to special ed. And we are not unique in this situation either. And again, the state for a long time was under 30%. Now the last year, there was in the last biennium, we'll get it to 32 or 33%. The problem is what happens is it's just a set amount of money that goes in. Well, when people start putting their claims in, eventually it's like, oops, this won't cover 33% for everybody. Well, we can get to 31%. So that's what your reimbursement is.
Okay.
So it's not a sum sufficient to meet 33%. It's some certain, and you get whatever is available. And so I know there's been a lot of talk of trying to up that number. And again, Is it going to be 100%? Unlikely,
No.
unlikely. But if we could get it to 50%,
Yeah.
I mean, 50% alone would mean freeing up almost $200,000 that we would be able to use in general education, which is really where that money is. We have to move it to another account.
You also mentioned mill rate. Now, mill rate is something that you and I could probably talk for 2 hours about because there's so many
We
layers
won't have
to that.
anybody left listening, but we
Right,
could talk about
right,
it.
right. So, interest of time and engagement in people's interest. But touch on that because you said that is an important factor here as well.
Well, the mill rate, obviously, you want to make sure that you're trying to do what's uh, what's good for your citizens. I mean, we understand. I'm a taxpayer like others, and we want to make sure that we're not that we're trying to come up with a way to address the funding issue and the ability to keep our school viable and successful without overtaxing our community. And so, and again, one of the differences, and you prefaced it at the beginning of the show, is what's the difference between the November mill rates and the ones that we are presenting here in April, and they are different.
Yeah.
And
Why?
well, we used it's called defeasance, and it's really the idea that what we have done is set aside some money to for our capital debt, which was the addition
Yep.
that was added on recently. So we've been stockpiling some money, which allows us to then prepay and refinance essentially the government obligation bonds. And what that does is then frees up some funding for us that we can then use to pay for the referendum. So it really, what we're doing is we're reducing the amount needed to service our debt, and that difference then we're using then for to help on the operations side. And so by doing that, we're able to manage that mill rate in a much in a way that allows for a more gradual increase than a huge, dollar 20. We're looking at over the course of the 4 years, the mill rate will go up 26 cents total. So it'll go from 7.48, which is what it is currently
Mm-hmm.
this year, to the end of that 28-29 year, it will be at 7.74. So it'll be a very gradual increase first, huge chunks. And in the one in November, by the end, it was going to go up over $1.50 from where it would have started
Holy
before.
cow.
So yeah, I can understand why people felt, maybe, yeah, I'd like to support it, but I don't think I can financially. My hope now is people are going to look at that and say, this is far more reasonable. I can afford, this amount versus, obviously a much larger amount.
Yeah. So in the the 4 years that where that money will be going, $505,000 this coming school year, 25-26, and then 875, then 1.2, then 1.7. Why is there? I mean, these aren't like 500,000 the first year. Then with the cost, food will probably go up, and maybe it's a teacher sale. Maybe it's going to be 575. Going from year one, 500,000 to 1.7 million by the end of the fourth year. Huge disparities. That why such a big jump from year to year?
Well, yeah, you have to, because the 500,000 exists today.
Mhm.
Okay. And so you fill it today. The problem is it's still there next year. So you have to fill that, and then the additional costs go on top of that. And so the next year that hole's back. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
You have to fill that hole, keep filling the hole, and the hole keeps getting a little deeper because you have those other costs and expenses that are going on. And so without additional revenue coming in, like I said, going to pay your people a little bit more. You're going to cover some insurance, price of, you need to buy a new bus. Last year we had to buy 2 new buses. We didn't budget for that. They just broke down. I mean,
Oh,
and a new bus will cost you $125,000 to $150,000. Well, you don't have that money just sitting around,
no.
so it does impact in some other, and that happens. I mean, you have a mechanical issue, and you didn't budget for the 20 grand to fix it, but you're going to fix it. And
Yeah.
so you can't, and so you can't put those chunks of money saying, well, just in case. Well, just in case doesn't always come, so
Yeah.
now now are you not being, are you charging people more than you should
Right.
because you're hoping that something,
Yeah.
so
Right. Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
hoping
I
something
get.
doesn't go on, or
You're
you're
right.
hoping something does, I guess,
So
the other side.
let's get to the, so there's two more talking points here. One is the how will the money be spent, and then last we'll wrap it up with impact if the referendum fails. So
Mhm.
how the money will be or how will the money be spent? You had some bullet points here. I'm going to go through them and we'll circle back and break them down. But high quality academic programs and career technical education, academic support for students, recruitment and retention of high qualified teachers and staff, athletic and extracurricular programs, and proper maintenance of buildings and grounds. Let's start at the first one. High quality academic programs and career technical education. Could you elaborate on that?
Sure. We want to continue to make sure we're providing our students the opportunity to develop the skills and the knowledge to step out of the doors of Shell Lake, and whether they're going on to college or technical college or the university, or they're going into the world of work or the military, that they have skills that will translate. And so we've been doing a lot of work in trying to increase the number of dual credit options. And we're working with Northwood Tech with that so that students can be taking classes in high school that will also give them college credit when they leave.
And
The,
that costs the school district money to do that?
uh, it does, depending on which avenue they go. There's two programs out there. It's called Start College Now, which is for the technical colleges, and
Uh-huh.
then there's Early College Credit, which is for the university. And so if those programs they do cost us some money, but I mean, it's a state program. We have to participate. But what we're looking at doing is developing our own staff so that they are accredited by Northwood. So
I
we're already
see.
paying those folks, but now because they have met certain qualifications that Northwood requires, Northwood will also then give them the college credit for that class. So the kid
I see.
gets the high school credit and the college.
And
And
that's
so
brilliant.
when I first got here, we had like two of those classes. We have five now. We're hoping for eight next year. But part of that is how we're developing our own staff
Okay.
and opening it up wider. We do have a lot of our seniors like to take college English through UW Barron County. I still call it that. I'm sorry, I'm old school.
What is it
But
called now?
it's UW Eau Claire, Barron County.
Oh, whatever.
The whole, yeah, whatever. But we now have a teacher on staff that is accredited at the university level, so we can teach that high school English here in our building, and I think open it up to more options for other kids to take it, because it used to be online. Well, not everyone likes the online thing. We found out a lot about that during the
Yeah.
COVID time. Um, and so now the kid will also get the college credit for the English and the high school credit. So we're looking to, and I believe these are the things that add value and allow our kids to have some opportunities when they go out that put them ahead of the game. We're really pushing kind of a revamp of our technology ed program, our tech ed program. We were able to secure 10 brand new multi-purpose welders. We're looking to try to beef up our welding program. Our new tech ed teacher is looking to also get accredited through Northwood so that you can get high school credit for the welding class and Northwood College credit for the welding program. So we're doing some of those
And
types of things.
out of
We want to
curiosity,
continue to do that.
so the student wouldn't, or well, I should say, the parents of the student don't have to pay, or do they, for that
No,
class?
it's a
So
high school course.
and if they didn't get that in high school, or if that program wasn't available at Shelley, and they went to Northwood Tech, they of course would have to pay for that. So it's,
Right.
I didn't know that was a thing. That's freaking
Yeah.
awesome. The
Yeah.
next one on here, it says academic support for students. That seems to be like a really big umbrella bullet point. I mean,
Well,
academic support,
well,
but what does that mean?
well, that goes in the area of things like counseling, and sort of reading and math support. Obviously, you have struggling learners, and uh, obviously in a classroom, sometimes the teacher will give the child individual instruction, but sometimes they need even more.
I
So
was one of those students.
So
Yes.
So
Yes.
now those are the people that help to provide that additional support.
Understood.
Nursing services fall under that. We do have a number of kids who have some pretty significant health needs. And so having a person here with medical training who can develop a plan, know how to react, I think that's very reassuring if you're the parent of a student who has medical needs. Yeah. And so, I mean, those are things that I think help students learn too, because they're not, they're getting that help that they need.
Uh, I don't want to get on into politics, but is a. Let me. Do you currently have an in-house person for individuals or students that need? So I'll just put on the umbrella of mental health counseling or guidance or therapy, whatever that is officially called. Is that someone in-house, or do you typically kind of sublet that out and bring someone in?
Well, we have, school counselors, which are, we used to call them guidance counselors back,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
years ago. So we still have those folks. But 2 years ago, we wrote a grant, and we were one of two schools in the state of Wisconsin to receive it. It was a federal mental health grant. And so with that grant, it's for $200,000 a year. We've actually been able to hire another school guidance counselor, but we are also then able to use that money to pay to have outside counseling, true mental
Yeah,
health counselors who do come into the building.
sure.
And obviously, students can access that service. Obviously, parents will have to sign off. It's
Yeah.
all no different than if you were going to sign up on your own outside of school. You'd go through all that admission and
Mhm.
enrollment, but we're able to offset that cost for those families through that grant. And so what we're doing is we're providing some families the access that they probably wouldn't have
Yep.
or couldn't afford without
Yep.
the grant. Obviously, the grant has a sunset a couple of years down the road yet, but you know, got to make a difference when you can, I guess is what I
Exactly,
would
and
say.
that's where the politics part is not really the politics, just the what's happening. I know there was that few weeks ago, maybe a month and a half, whatever it was, where federal programs and a lot of things are kind of getting shut off, right?
Yep.
And I was just wondering, does that impact the grant? Does that mean that those individuals that are coming providing mental health, the professionals in that world, that gets turned off too in that moment? And if so, does the school district say, well, we're just going to eat the cost, but we can't eat the cost, but it's so wildly important that we have these? Because how do you tell a kid that's been going for 2 years to see this person that's really helping them in their life, and then all of a sudden, yep, sorry.
No, I think, Ben, you bring up a really important point there. Um, we weren't sure what was going to happen there, and we're still not, because obviously not everything
No,
has been
no, no,
sorted out here
no,
very
no.
well. But our concern is that the grant would go away, and so we would obviously stop. I mean, because we could not
You can't
take
eat
on
that.
the
No.
cost. There's no way, which again would be really unfortunate for those children and those families who
Yeah,
are taking advantage of this.
I know it.
And you mentioned federal grants, and at that time, I did a little digging because I'm like, well, how much? What would the impact be? The school district of Shell Lake receives $1.3 million in federal grants. Now, that comes in a variety of different ways. Now, that's
Mm-mm.
outside of our revenue. That's
Right.
outside. Grants are a whole separate entity, but we receive $1.3 million. And again, that comes in different ways. Title One, which is we use for our reading, some of those intervention things or for
Mhm.
reading support. Now, obviously, the money we get doesn't pay for everything. So that's where, if we have to cut, the program probably, we could have a part of the money, but instead of two people, we'd only have one person, that
Sure.
type of thing. We get a lot of money there. I mentioned the federal mental health grant. Our after school program that runs every night after school from 3:30 to 5:30. That is a CLC grant, which is also a federal grant. We have probably 45 to 50 kids every night in that program. And most of them it's obviously geared to K-6, but I mean, for a lot of
I'm
families,
sorry, geared to what?
to kindergarten through sixth grade.
Oh,
I'm
K
sorry.
through 6th. I said case 6. I'm like, I don't know what
Okay,
that case is.
right.
Got it.
But and so a lot of the kids get a snack, they do some homework, they do
Yeah.
some activities, and for
And mom and
parents,
dad can still stay at work, right?
exactly, exactly, and they come and pick up the kids. We do bus kids home, but that is also paid for out of that grant. So we're not adding additional transportation costs. That after school transportation is part of the grant. And so that's a really important program. We also, I mean, we do get a lot of money for special ed through grants.
Yeah.
It's not the same stuff we're talking about for the reimbursement. It's a different pot of money. Food service. We're part of the federal school lunch program. The reason we can charge $3.25 for a regular lunch is that the government helps to keep that cost down so families can afford it. Any free or reduced lunch, that cost is offset by the federal government as well. If you were to remove that grants, I don't know how we'd produce lunch. I mean, because lunches would probably go up to $6-7 a
Yeah.
piece, and most families cannot afford. You have 2-3 kids, it's going to cost you $20 a day to feed your kids. That's going to
Yeah.
be
And that's just one day. I mean,
yeah, it's just
creep.
one day. That's going to be quite an economic hardship for a lot of people.
Yeah. All right, let's keep moving on here. How will the money be spent? There's 2 more bullet points you have. The penultimate bullet point is athletic and extracurricular programs.
You know, we've looked at what is our participation rate in our middle school and high school. 80% of our middle school and high school kids are involved in at least one extracurricular activity.
Outstanding.
Most kids are in 2 or 3, but 80% of our kids are doing something. And we know from the research that students who are involved in extracurricular
GPA
activity,
goes up, their
yeah,
health goes up. I mean,
behavior's
everything
better,
goes through the
everything's
roof.
better. So, I mean,
Yes.
the thought of reducing or eliminating some of that, I think it's kind of counterintuitive to what
Kind
we're
of.
trying to do.
Yeah.
And again, as a total budget, it's not huge. I mean, it's less than 1% of our budget,
Okay.
but it provides a tremendous impact. And what happens too, families are very mobile these days. So, we've had kids who, that if you took certain of these programs away, they might be looking at, now, does Spooner do this? Does Cumberland do this? I mean, so now suddenly people start finding what
Yeah.
they want. And
And I
again,
think there's something to that too, Todd, that you also have to make the school as attractive as possible because people are doing that, whether they're in Spooner or Cumberland already. Like everyone's going to do that. You're always going to search for the best option. You want a lawnmower. You're just not going to go to your local hardware store and just buy the first one. You do your research and find out which one is going to best fit my needs. So you want to offer as many things as you possibly can, not only to not lose students, but also to, parents will look at it and go, this is a great opportunity for our kid here.
Yeah, we see that, and we see sort of what we're doing with those dual credits with that relationship with Northwood Tech.
Huge.
We're seeing that as, potentially a marketing opportunity too, to say, here's the kind of thing that Shell Lake can provide for students.
All right, well, let's get to this last one because we're almost against our time. We can go a little bit longer, but proper maintenance of buildings and grounds. That makes it sound like you haven't been proper in your maintenance. Like,
no, actually, we have been. And I did 3 class reunion tours this summer. The class of 74, 79, and 84 came back different weekends. And they were like, hey, can we get a tour of the school? I'm like, no problem. So Saturday afternoon, I'd come and kind of walk around and give them a little lowdown. And many of these folks hadn't been in the new building. For them, the new building is the high school, the one that was built in when your junior year. That's for them is the new building. They didn't even realize there was another new building. So walking through the building, and a lot of them are like, wow, how old is this building? I'm like, 30 years. I'm like, no way. I'm like, yeah, this building has been incredibly well maintained. And again, that costs money to do. And in a situation when something breaks, our philosophy has been, let's fix it right and not just put a Band-Aid on it. And then a year or 2 later, now we've got the same problem, but only worse. Mm-hmm. So that takes money to do that, to adequately clean it every day. That makes a difference. It's a better environment for the kids to learn in and for the staff to work in as well. So we want to make sure that we're able to continue to address those things so that people don't walk in and go, what happened? This looks awful. It's dirty. It's, type of thing. I think you might have skipped it. If I could just back you up, because I think there is one point there I do want to.
Recruitment and retention of highly qualified teachers and staff. I don't know how I missed that one.
Yeah,
that's a big one.
It is a big one. And again, it has become far more challenging to find good teachers and good support staff. And so we want to make sure that when we do have an opening, that we're able to attract the best. We had a math position open for over a year and a half. We had a few applicants, underqualified, were not quality. So we were fortunate. We did find somebody at the, who had probably 3 weeks before school started, somebody just happened to move in the area, and they've turned out to be a wonderful, wonderful teacher. Now there's a little luck involved in that.
Yeah.
But if you go on WeCan, which is a statewide network where schools go post their jobs, I guarantee you will see there are hundreds of jobs that are open from the fall that there still haven't been filled. And obviously you get to a point where you start to go, well, it's just not going to happen. But there is such a shortage out there. I was an elementary principal in Marshfield for many, many years back in the 2000s. And we'd get a classroom teacher job would open up, and we'd have 50 or 60 applicants. And again, Marshfield, bigger district. I do know the superintendent there, and they get 10, 12 now. Now, here we post a position, we get 3 or 4 applicants, and you're hoping that out of 3 or 4, you could maybe find one. But, those odds are getting long. So we want to make sure that when we recruit somebody, we can keep them. And obviously part of that is developing a culture that people want, feel strong about, and they really want to be there. But you also have to make sure that you're providing some level of compensation.
Well, yeah, it's competitive pay.
Money's not the only thing. But it's
a thing. It just is. When you look around the area, where is Shell Lake compared to like starting pay for a teacher? Like what you're able to offer? Is it we're really far below everyone else, or no, we're competitive-ish, but we need to be more attractive to potential teachers?
I would say, and I've kind of compared, with.
Sure.
We get a lot of data through our CISA 11. We're closer to the bottom, but again, that doesn't mean everybody we hire we start there.
Sure.
Obviously, if we are able to a teacher that has some years of experience, we're certainly going to take that into account.
Sure.
As well. So but we are closer to the bottom, and it's the same is true on the other end. I mean, our top end salary is lower than most other areas' top end salary. And again, sure. The board isn't necessarily proud of that. I'm not. We believe our people are good. They're hardworking and certainly deserve more. But again, when you have the financial restrictions that we have, you have to be pretty judicious with how you spend your money too. Yeah. And so we also, Shell Lake has a very limited post-employment benefit package. In fact, unless you were hired prior to 2012, you really don't have anything. Like a lot of districts will have, you retire, you get 3 or 4 years of health insurance paid for. Well, we don't do anything like that. And again, one of the reasons why our cost is less for our employees. But on the other hand, that also doesn't necessarily attract as many people.
Understood.
That potential is there. Not everyone's looking at the same thing, but
right.
But those are considerations that you have to look at. So
we have
an amazing job of maintaining costs and putting out a good quality product at the end, and that's students who are hopefully ready to compete, regionally, hopefully statewide.
We have a question here I want to get to. From Carol, thank you, Carol, how was the homeschool movement affected your school enrollment, economy, etc., and are homeschooled kids allowed to participate in extracurriculars?
Homeschool, obviously, there was a pretty big decline in some of our enrollment right around the COVID time. Yeah. And again, that was before my time. And again, some of those families did come back, not all of them. But, with extracurriculars, right now, we haven't had a lot of asks to do that. We also have set up an arrangement with Rural Virtual Academy. If people want to do maybe homeschool or virtual school through there, those kids are allowed to come and participate in everything that other kids can, clubs, sports, prom, all those important things.
Prom. I don't know if I'm at prom with that one. All right, let's get to this last part here. Of course, that is the impact if the referendum fails. You had 3 bullet points here. First is staff reductions. What are we really talking about? Exactly what are we talking? If this fails, are you already anticipating 3 people have to get cut, 5 people have to get cut, 10? What are we talking about?
Well, and this is the tricky part because where do you find the cuts that don't have dramatic impact on kids? Now, at the elementary level, we reduced 3 positions in the last 2 years. And when I got here, there was 3 sections in kindergarten, first, second, and third grade. We are down to 1. First grade is the only grade that has 3 sections. That'll be gone next year. And why? The enrollment is shrinking a little bit there, which allows us to say 2 teachers with 17 to 20 kids makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the problem is the next shrink is what's the number that you go with 1 teacher with 30 kids or 35 kids? Where's that magic number? And again, as an elementary principal for 16 years, you get much past 27, 28 in 1 teacher, that's going to be tricky. It's going to be hard on that teacher. A lot of kids are not going to get the individual help that you want them to. So until that enrollment shrinks enough, you probably aren't cutting anymore at the level. Well, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. It's bad education at that point. So where do you look? You start looking at those support positions, reading support, math support. Again, you don't have to have them, but we all know we have kids who are struggling. And so it ends up often focusing on those electives. Tech ed, ag. Again, don't need those, but boy, they do a lot to prepare our kids for that next step.
Yeah.
And almost all of those departments have 1 teacher. So it's not like a Rice Lake or an Eau Claire where you can say, yeah, we got 4 teachers in that department, we're cutting 1. The department still exists and probably can function. You have a department of 1 ends the department. Or if you say, well, we'll cut them down. We'll cut them to half-time. Okay. But I can tell you, most teachers, what they'll be looking for is a full-time gig. And so eventually, you know what I'm saying? I mean, that's just, most people have built their lives around full-time employment. And so and so what ends up happening is that either the program is cut and gone or it bleeds out and it's gone. So, and those are important programs for kids. I mean, a lot of that stuff is, how we're preparing for life skills and that type of thing. So
you also have on here resource shortages.
Well, obviously we'd start to reduce the number of supplies, resources, things, like technology. We do obviously have, each student has a Chromebook, and we have set them up on a 4-year rotation. So every 4 years we have to rotate some in, because let's face it, kids are kind of hard on electronics, even the good ones. 4 years with a computer, and we all know technology is changing so quickly. So, but we may have to stretch it out to 5 years or more, which again results in a lot of breakdowns, and and so you want to make sure you give the kids the tools to be successful too.
And lastly, here you have reduced cleaning and maintenance. I don't know. I chuckle a little bit at this. I just kind of anticipate. Like that's your selling point. You guys just didn't you do something Wednesday night or Tuesday night? Something.
Yeah, Wednesday night we had a public meeting, or information meeting.
Yeah. So all you have to do, was that held at the school?
Yep, in the school library.
You should have just waited like a week and didn't clean anything, and that's your whole selling point right there. Yep, this is what your kids are going to walk into now. No, we're firing all the maintenance people and the.
Well, it actually works out kind of good, because when the people come in, they see the people working on cleaning, because we have our night crew is in there, running the floor scrubbers and hauling the garbage out, doing all those things that need to be done daily. So what again, we touched a little bit on that whole maintenance thing earlier. Yeah. It's going to defer maintenance on things, or it's going to result in it being a sort of quick fix and not a permanent fix.
So just kind of going back to, the referendum is on April 1st.
Yep.
Operational referendum. We just walked through a lot of this stuff, but looking in the future here, if we have, what was it? 500,000 for the 25-26, 875, then 1.2, then 1.7 million. In your current projections here, and I don't know if that's a school or if you've hired outside.
We use Baird Financial.
Oh, there you go. So they've looked at this, they've mapped it all out. What's going to happen so the last one is $1.7 million for the 2028-2029 school year. What happens in the 29-30 school year, given the current trajections? If as of right now and any trends, we're losing 1% of enrollment a year or whatever it is, and if we keep going this way, this is where we're going to be. And if costs keep going up, I'm sure very smart people have figured this out. What's going to happen in the 29-30 when we no longer have that $1.7 million in there? And assuming for a moment, obviously we don't know anything that's going on with the public education right now, and if they're going to read, that's a whole other thing. Let's assume for a moment nothing really gets changed. No more money really comes in for you guys. You get the referendum in 5 years. Now what?
Well, and that's really the next 4 years we'll be working ourselves towards that. Now, obviously, the first hope is that the state will increase the revenue limit. I mean, there's a lot of talk at Madison right now, and I believe you probably had
Romaine yesterday.
You might have mentioned some of that yesterday.
Yep.
How much will that be? Any amount's going to help us. We're near the bottom, so anything's going to be good. So you're hoping that some of that takes place. We're going to continue to right size as we have the last couple of years with reducing those positions that make sense. Right now, more of our enrollment is 712 or 612 than it is PK5. So there is the potential over the next 3 to 4 years at those numbers at the elementary may come down to maybe there is some one section opportunities there. So we'll be looking at those type of things as well. So we're going to be working on both of those, some of those as we move towards that. Obviously, clearly, there is a concern at that point.
And especially if that concern is, it sounds like a lot of this is going to be dependent on more funding from the state or government. And that's something you can't control, right? You can't control that part.
Yeah, that's the scary part. And I mentioned even some additional special ed reimbursement. So some of those things, if they do come into place, that's going to mitigate that need all the way across the board. And even now, if for some blessed reason, the legislature said, you know what, we're going to give you $1,000 more a kid. You low spending folks, we need to boost you up. We will, and that would change our deficits all the way across the board from this year to the end. And we would not have to levy to the entire amount if something like that were to happen. That'd be the best case scenario. The state steps in and says, "We're going to $1,000
more." That's almost $6. That's $5. Well, you said you had 570. So that's $570,000.
Yeah. So I mean, you can see what that does to the first year. You can see
it wipes out the first year.
That goes all the way across. So that changes all those numbers. And if that's the case, and then hey, we're going to give you a little more reimbursement for special ed, so add a little bit more there. If that's the case, what the referendum does is it gives us the authority to levy to those amounts.
Yes.
It doesn't say we have to. So if we're looking and say, wow, the state gave us some additional money and our deficit's only $375,000, that's all we would levy to. We don't have to go over the top. And so obviously that would then reduce the mill rate. It would all go with that. So those are all the things that we're going to look at. We're going to look at, also having some discussions with Spooner and saying not consolidation, but are there some things that we can share? Are there some ways that we can cooperate? Hey, you have this program and we have this program. Can we maybe send our kids back and forth potentially?
Representative Dave Armstrong brought that up last year when he was on for a show. And he said, it's kind of reimagining and rethinking how we're doing it. It doesn't mean you just close down one school and absorb them to the other ones. That's not the answer. But if there are other things that you could save. What's that?
I'm sorry. There's some schools south of Eau Claire that have been doing this for years. There's 4 schools that their kids are kind of moving back and forth based on.
And if that saves money, I mean, that's great too. And they still get the program. Listen, I have one more question for you. I'm sure you get asked this question a lot. How much is it going to cost for the average taxpayer? This come to fruition and it's elected. How much is it for the average?
Well,
or is it not an average? It's like an actual flat rate.
We'll pick for a $300,000 property, which is about the average property, I guess, in the Shell Lake area.
Okay.
That first year, it's $18.
What about the fourth year when it's $1.7 million?
$27
A year or a month?
a year.
Oh,
We're
well,
talking a nickel a day.
well, I don't know. I don't know if I can swing that.
Yeah,
Really.
dig deep. Check the couch.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We blew past our time. We went along. Thank you for staying
appreciate the
on.
opportunity.
Yeah, we covered a lot of stuff. We could talk all day about this, but is there anything else you wanted to make sure that we talked about or say that we didn't get a chance to
I
talk
think
about?
we really, and I appreciate you, setting, up with the talking points. I think that makes this time better for both of us, and for your listeners. I guess I would encourage, if people do have questions about the referendum,
But we
to
do have one.
contact us.
We just got one. Dave Wilson, how many years are left on your debt service? I don't know what debt service is, but okay. You don't have to tell us. Yeah.
I can tell you. 13 years.
13 years. Well, there you go, Dave. I'm sorry. So you were saying that if anyone has questions,
Yeah, to please contact me at Shell Lake. Our goal is to make sure people are informed, and so if you have questions, or you heard something from someone that didn't sound right, please come and call me. Stop in the office. We want to make sure that, like I said, that people, when they do go to vote, they're going as informed voters. And
stop into your very clean office.
yes, absolutely. Clean.
Right.
You
Yeah.
run your finger along the top of something.
Thank you. Special thank you to Shell Lake School Superintendent Todd Felhofer for taking time, to come on for a chat with us today. In case you missed some of today's chat, the full recording will remain here on our Facebook page, but also on later today. You'll find it on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/DrydenWire and on our website at DrydenWire.com. Excuse me. Sheesh. We had so much to talk about today. I'm starting to lose my voice. I'll see all of you right back here on Tuesday when Barron County Sheriff Chris Fitzgerald and I will be back for our weekly Positive Tuesday with Ben and Fitzy show. So until then, thank you for watching, and as always, have a blessed day.